everybody. I'm Matt Pamonti. I'm joined by Sean Gallagher here. We are in Lansing, Michigan today. So take me through a little. So you're number 12 on the leaderboard, which is pretty amazing. Being up there, a lot of great players in the room. We just qualified 3 players last season. Sounds like you're going to make a run for the championship also.
Yeah, I'm going to make a run for it. I have a little bit of driving to do. I mean, I drove 10 hours here, and then I have Chicago, which is like 6 or 7 hours at the end of July. But depending on where we're at there, I mean, I'm going to keep driving to all these.
Very cool. Well, we're happy to see you. I know I've seen you a bunch, and we've kind of gotten to know each other a little bit. Just, in passing, I come check in every so often. Like, hey, how's it going? Hey, how's it going? You know, you and I are pretty easy to spot. You're in this outfit. I'm in this. So we're probably like 2 of the easier people to spot.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about you and I just talked a little bit. We've seen this money pile deck. Now you've played Modern Horizons 2 makes your deck possible, right? Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So for this year, Modern has been pretty good to me. Modern Horizons 2, I got second place at Milwaukee playing Murktide, which is almost exclusively Modern Horizons 2 cards. And then I decided that deck wasn't expensive enough, so I decided to play 4-color.
Perfect. You gotta have 80 cards. So why not, man? If you got the money, spend it.
Exactly. So I don't have a lot of friends, so I have a lot of money to spend on Magic cards. So I have my Modern deck money pile, and then just plays all these busted Modern Horizons 2 cards, and then the talk of the town is what's going to get banned next. Yorion, Rend in 6, who knows? But
yeah, it's really interesting. So I came over actually and watched a little bit of your match at the end there.
Yeah.
If I'm on the opposite side of the table trying to play against Solitude, Fury, Forced Negations, it's really difficult. Now, back when I was playing a bunch, it's pretty heads up. I Thoughtseize you, and I'm like, oh, cool. I know what we're playing around for the next several turns.
Yeah.
Nowadays, and if you have mana up available, nowadays it's like, well, what are they going to do? Are they going to bounce my stuff? Are they going to cycle? Are they going to, all the evoke cards and stuff like that? It's really difficult to play around your deck. It's probably really difficult to play too, right?
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to play, but the one nice thing about the deck is even when you're pretty far behind me, my opponent last round had 5 creatures in play, and I just got to blink my Yorion with an Ephemerate, blink out 2 creatures, and cast a Supreme Verdict. Like a 5 or 6 for 1. So you have a lot of these cards that kind of just maximum value. I mean, Expressive Iteration, we all see how busted that card is. So when you're just playing 2 for 1s, it's really easy to come from behind. That's one of the powers of playing money pile for sure.
Yeah, it's a sweet deck, that's for sure. So tell me a little bit about the team you're on, Arclight Gaming.
Yeah, so I've been a part of Team Arclight now, co-captain with Nicole Callahan, Lady of the Crease. We have a couple of people who are actually playing on the Energy Circuit. Piper Powell, who won, I want to say, in Milwaukee, I think, maybe. She won playing Living End, which was awesome to watch. And then she ended up top 8ing the next day playing Blue Red Delver. So she did really well. Team Arclight is mainly about our team working together, kind of making sure everyone's able to get to the next goal, less about the individual accomplishments, and making sure that we're all working together to help each other get to that next goal.
Very cool, man. Well, we got 1 qualified for champs. You're hopefully next, man. Number 12 is a great spot to be. And, obviously today's the start of the next season, so making a good push for it. Got a great deck. How do you feel about tomorrow? That's the one thing I want to ask about, too.
Yeah, so I'm playing Yorion today. I figured, why not play it again tomorrow? So I'm playing Blue-White Yorion tomorrow. The reason I like the deck is because it has a reasonable Phoenix matchup, and I think that with Winota being banned, people are going to kind of gravitate towards Phoenix being like one of the better decks. So why not play a Broken Companion in that format too, I thought. So.
Very cool. All right, man, anything else you want to chat about? Any shout-outs you want to give before we wrap it up?
Yeah, so I mean, shout-out to my friends in Minneapolis who are watching. They'll probably make fun of me for this interview, but...
Hey, that's fine. Me too.
Yeah, and then one last thing, I wanted to shout out to Eric Hawkins, who helped us make top 8 last time with an awesome top 8.
Oh, yeah. That has to be one of my all-time favorite moments I've ever seen, because I'm sitting, probably, 50 feet away, and Eric's, rubbing the top of his deck, and I'm like, oh, man, he's going to hit it. And it's a no-look, just slam down. So if you get a chance to go watch that match, the called shots are so cool. How often does it really happen when someone knocks their deck and they actually hit the card, right?
Yeah, it was wild, honestly. It was a miracle on 4th Street, for sure.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. So, all right, well, Sean, thanks for the time, man, and good luck the rest of the day.
Thanks.
And I'll catch everybody next time for a good interview, and we'll sit down and get to know some more players on the Energy Series. All right, welcome back. I went back in time and I changed shirts. Look, I'm in a black shirt now. I was in a white shirt then. This is great. Devin, we're ready for the quarterfinals, man. So it's been a long journey to get here. 8 rounds of Swiss. let's check out the top 8 slide here and see kind of what we're looking at. So again, we mentioned there's quite a few different archetypes here in this top 8 playoff. So Sean Ryder playing Rakdos midrange versus Scott Polera, who we've seen almost all these players today actually on camera. And Scott Polera playing Is It Phoenix. I believe I watched Carly Peterson in, I think, round 1, maybe round 2, playing Mono Blue Spirits. She is playing against Raja Sulaiman, who is playing Esper Control, which will actually be our main feature match for this quarterfinal. On the other side of the bracket there, you got Larry Fields playing Rakdos midrange versus Kyle Gonzalez on Mono Green Devotion. Then our backup match for this quarterfinals is going to be Jeffrey Carr, who we just watched on Rakdos Combo, against Zach Allen playing Esper Yorion. And Zach actually top-aided and got second place in the tournament this morning, which is pretty amazing. He's been on a heck of a run here on the NRG series, so excited to see him back in a top 8. And it sounds like the players might be ready for us, Devin. If you're ready for Magic, man, I am.
I couldn't be more than ready. We'll like you mentioned, we'll see if Zach Allen can do one finish better than his finish in Modern Event yesterday. So,
all right, cool. So here we go. Raja on the left with that Esper control deck, and Carly's playing Mono Blue Spirits. Earlier on in the day, I believe, I think Mono Blue Spirits played against like an Azorius control deck or something like that. It was Dimir control actually, and Carly just put their opponent in the dumpster.
right. The thing that Carly has going for her is she has a lot of disruptive elements, right? You think Geistlight Snare and the one drop that escapes my name, Mausoleum Wanderer. So a lot of disruption in terms of counter spells and ways to kind of protect. And also the really nice thing about Carly's deck, and she can play almost entirely at instant speed, right? Things like Rattle Chains and all these counter spells, Brazen Bar. You see another flash creature here. So it's one of those things where we can kind of just play that kind of like flash style game and play kind of on the same terms as the Esper control deck.
Yeah, it's amazing how it worked for her in that round that we ended up watching, and all of the creatures being able to have flash with rattle chains, like you mentioned, or just being able to protect themselves. Sometimes they outgrow the red-based damage spells. Is really really amazing against these control style decks.
Right, exactly. We see a Thoughtseize here. It looks like, and you see that is a big tell here. Thoughtseize takes Rattle Chains. That is one of those cards that allows Carly to play at Flash. And not only is the Rattle Chains itself have Flash, it gives every single other spirit you have Flash. So once the Rattle Chains is in play, Carly gets to dictate the pace of the game and how you have a threat in play. And it's one of those things where you just get to hold up all of your mana the entire time. And it's a situation like here where she kind of has to tap out and is at the mercy of whether or not Raja has another removal spell, rather than getting to hold up mana and still have access to those threats with Rattle Chains.
Yeah, and you see very efficient for Carly as well. There is that's an Ascendant Spirit there, followed up by a Supreme Phantom, so kind of like a Spirit Lord, if you will. And it's going to be quite a bit for Raja to get back in it if Carly's able to untap here and start drawing cards and suiting up one of those spirits.
Right, and remember, we do know that Carly does have access to Curious Obsession, so especially if she can kind of back it up with a counterspell. Now, one thing I will mention, Raja does have copies of Void Rend, so if he has access to that, that can get past the counterspell. Remember, Void Rend is uncounterable.
Yeah. Looks like Raja's going to lead off on a Fatal Push here, maybe. Thinking. Gonna wait for Carly to deploy some mana to pump that up, and she doesn't, probably sniffs out a counterspell.
Yeah, or a Fatal Push doesn't want to kind of walk into using a lot. She uses a lot of some of her mana on the Ascendant Spirit, and it gets Fatal Push. That can be a pretty big tempo swing for Raja.
Yeah. So another Ascendant Spirit off the top here for Carly. And Raja just has, it looks like lands and a Dovin's Veto in hand. So
yeah, Dovin's Veto, not the best, but it can answer the Curious Obsession that we know about. So we're shocking here. So we got something.
Yeah. Carly going to go ahead and pump up that Ascendant Spirit, it looks like, to make it a 2/3. And that is going to get Heartless acted, is what that is, I believe. So
Yeah, it looks like the leftovers are, like you said, Dovin's Veto, a couple lands here. So Raja wanted the shock to be able to Heartless Act. Perfect timing on the Heartless Act because we're doing it while Carly's tapped out or has access to less mana. So something like a Rattle Chains wouldn't be able to get in the mix and kind of counter that Heartless Act. And now you get to hold up Dovin's Veto for that Curious Obsession.
Yeah, I think Carly actually picked up a Spectral Sailor there, which is quite good as well. Man, these things having flash is a real beating for the Esper control decks.
Right, and that's why we, you saw Raja take a huge priority on that Rattle Chains, because if that's in play, every single creature in Carly's deck can be played at instant speed, which makes life so much harder for Raja.
Yeah, Raja goes and picks up that Yorion from hand, and Carly already has a built-in answer to that with that Brazen Burrow. She's gonna go ahead and deploy it anyway, just as a 3/1. I don't mind that really.
Yeah, you just want to kind of keep the pressure going, right? You don't want to give Raja a lot of time, especially because we know about the Orion, so that's going to get vetoed.
Yeah.
I think Carly might have had a counter spell in her hand, and that's why she was setting up, Curious Obsession plus counter your removal spell. Unfortunately for Carly, that was met with a Dovin's Veto, which she can't fight over.
Yeah, I really think the leftovers are 3 lands and Yorion for Raja here. Just
Yeah, and if
great.
Carly does have a counter spell, something like what was the 2 mana one? I think
The
it's
Lofty Denial, maybe?
Lofty Denial. Yes,
Yeah.
Lofty Denial. Okay, go ahead and counter this. Geistlight Snare as well. Yeah, there's the snare.
Yeah. Geistlight Snare, it's tap land. It's like, all right, well, we'll run this back a few turns in a row.
Yeah, 2-turn clock.
Yeah. All right.
Now, one thing that Raja could have access to is something, if he rips a Supreme Verdict, that can't be countered, so that's kind of what he's looking for. I think it was a land.
I think it was an Omen of the Sea, which is actually not the worst here.
Okay.
Which
Yeah, looks like it was an Omen. You're right.
Yeah, you're just digging for this, can't be countered Wrath of God. There's something to be said if you're Carl and have a counter spell to counter this to not let Raja dig.
Right, because I believe all of Carly's counter spells are what we call soft counter spells. So counter unless you pay 3, counter unless you pay 4, right? So, in a situation like this, even something like a Spell Pierce, right? If you Spell Pierce that Omen of the Sea, if Raja pays for the Spell Pierce, he then cannot cast Supreme Verdict even with a land.
Okay. And there is a Teferi. Is that
okay?
That's bouncing. So it's tucking the Brazen Borrower, which is important to note. But here comes Spectral Sailor.
Sailor. So 3 damage, not quite 4. Let's see if we can find pick up a Lord here for Carly. Or Curious Obsession also does it because it's +1/+1.
All right. We rush it down to 2.
This is still pretty good.
That is a Shambling Vent. That ain't going to do it.
Cycle the Triome.
What do you think about like so it didn't work out there. What do you think about like in your upkeep cracking that Omen of the Sea to try and find an answer? And maybe Raja could have done that. I don't know. Again, it's one extra card, I believe, difference. Get to scry a couple, but at any rate, Carly Peterson going to pick up game number 1 here. Pretty easily, I would say.
Right, especially at the end there. I don't know if you caught a glimpse of that, but Raja drew a Shambling Vent and then a Teferi, and then he cycled the Triumph, drew the Teferi, but he had 4 mana untapped, and the 5th land was the Shambling Vent, so wasn't able to capitalize on that. And that's kind of exactly how Carly drew it up. That's exactly how she wants the games to go. Just cheap threats backed up by cheap interaction, and that's kind of the dream scenario for the mono blue deck.
Yeah, really rough for these Esper decks. So we're gonna jump into the players' deck list here and see who might get a little bit better post board. So let's see Raja's deck here. Now, I mean, you can't really beat like Kaya is pretty good, and the Mystical Disputes are gonna help, but there's only a pair of Mystical Disputes down there in the sideboard.
Yeah, only 2 mystical disputes. Those are obviously slam dunks. I think we're gonna, like you said, looking at the Kaya. The nice thing about Kaya is Carly does have access to a decent number of 1 mana creatures, specifically Mausoleum Wanderer and Spectral Sailor. And also, if I'm not mistaken, Kaya answers any permanent with 1 mana value. I believe it's non-land, so you can also hit Curious Obsession, which can be very important as well. So I like the Kaya. I like the disputes. And potentially we might also see these hermits, or these whatever these cards are called. I can't remember the
Malevolent
exact
Hermit.
name of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Malevolent Hermit. The nice thing about Malevolent Hermit is you can kind of potentially trade it off early for something like a counter spell out of Carly's side or a Curious Obsession, and then get some nice value in the flashback here because the 2/2 flying body on the backside can trade with one of Carly's creatures.
Yeah, I assume we want to get a little more lean, so like things like these absorbs may come out in favor of like mystical disputes. Uh, Raja does have like Oath of Kaya, which is actually a pretty good beating against these creatures, and he also has access to 3 Supreme Verdicts in the main deck, so maybe just kind of digging around for those will help out, and I think he'll be a lot better served in game number 2.
Yeah, the one thing I will mention about Oath of Kaya is Carly's deck is really low to the ground in terms of the mana value, and Oath of Kaya being a 3 mana sorcery speed removal spell can be awkward at times.
Sure. All right, so let's check out Carly's deck and see what how she's going to get better. So there's actually quite a bit here. There's actually 4 mystical disputes in the board here.
Yeah, what is this? There's a one of here. It's called Slip Out the Back. I gotta look this one up. So 1 mana, put a counter on a creature. So it's 1 blue instant, put a counter on target creature, and it phases out. So
Yep.
that could actually be something that she wants access to, especially against Supreme Verdict. Remember, Supreme Verdict can't be countered, but if you can kind of phase or blink out one of your creatures in response to a verdict, kind of a way to keep something on the battlefield post Supreme Verdict. So I like that. Disdainful Stroke, pretty good against Teferi and things of that nature. Potentially good against Memory Deluge as well, so something you might want access to. You mentioned the 4 copies of Disputes; those are a slam dunk. And then this other card, Witness Protection. I got to look this one up. This is 1 mana, enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a 1/1. Okay, we don't want to do that. That's the legitimate business person card. We don't want to bring
That's
that one
right.
in. But
Yeah, that's right.
but yeah, the Mystical Disputes, the Disdainful Strokes, and the Slip Out the Back. I think I like those.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you get rid of some like the soft counters, and you bring in like the more hard counters and things like that. And Carly's deck is really well suited for this matchup. It feels like an uphill battle for Raja. Game 2, he'll be on the play, but if there's a game 3 and Carly gets a chance to be on the play again, it's gonna be really tough for Raja to battle all this.
Yeah, I think honestly, the card that, if I'm on Carly's side, the card that I want to cut the most is probably Shacklegeist.
Yeah,
So you can afford to go a little bit down on creatures because this is one of those matchups where you're not trying to flood the board because of the existence of Supreme Verdict. You're trying to play more of a protect the creature type of thing where you play one creature and just back it up with a bunch of interaction. So, and Shacklegeist being a card that largely has no ability, the ability to tap a creature is not that relevant against Raja's deck, and it doesn't have flash by itself. So I think that's the card where that Carly's probably going to cut here.
yeah, I'm absolutely with you. It's probably Carly's worst creature in this style of matchup for sure. So cutting down on some of those and being able to protect and get some more counter spells for Carly only needs one creature, like you said, to go the distance, and as long as one sticks, probably going to be okay. Also, like the other funny part is, Wandering Emperor does a pretty good job of gumming up the board sometimes against creature decks, but not against some flying deck. So it'll be interesting to see if Raja actually values that card or kind of cuts it in favor of other things.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things where it is a removal spell, but it also costs 4 mana. So when your 4 mana removal spell trades for 1 mana versus a Spell Pierce or 1 mana versus a Geistlight Snare, it's just that tempo swing is so massive.
Sure. All right. Gonna lead off on a Godless Shrine. Smells like a removal spell.
Yeah, really heads up play by Raja, shocking the Godless Shrine. Honestly, even if he didn't have that Deserted Beach should come into play tapped.
Yeah, so
I
let's pause the game real
believe.
quick for
Yeah,
you,
can we
Tanner.
pause the game real quick?
I think you're correct. That's a deserted beach.
That's definitely a Deserted Beach. Yeah,
Okay. Just
the
pausing.
Deserted
So
Beach should have come into play tapped. The second land that Raja played.
We're trying to back it up. We'll make sure that's the case here, and we'll see. It shouldn't be too hard of a rewind to do if we need to rewind anything. Good catch, by the way, Devin. And well, maybe they're not pausing. We'll see. Hopefully, they're pausing.
Yeah, we always want to try and catch these as soon as possible. It's tough with the players playing so fast. They're playing at a brisk pace, and it's hard. Kind of at some point, it's really hard to kind of back it up. But we'll see if we can get the board state resolved here. So we got a Mausoleum Wanderer for Carly. I didn't get a good glimpse at Raj's hand. I see a Verdict. I see a couple of potential fancy full art cards. I can't quite tell what those are, though. Yeah, interesting start from Carly. No 1-drop, no 2-drop. So what that leads me to believe is she probably has some form of counterspell in her hand, trying to get a creature into play, maybe back it up with a counterspell. So looks like we're maybe trying to get this resolved here.
Yeah, so we got some judges on it. They are going to do whatever they need to do to probably reverse where we're at. So we'll let them do their thing, and me and Devin will do some chatting here while we wait for this to get resolved. So, man, this Mono Blue Spirits deck might not have been a deck that I would personally play, but it's really well suited here in the in this format. It looks like being able to fly over the green decks, and then being really well suited against the control style decks as well.
Yeah, the way that the green decks used to be built, so there was kind of a shift at some point. It's hard to exactly pinpoint when the shift was, but the green decks used to be focused on stuff like Voracious Hydra and Vivian. Vivian being the 4-mana planeswalker that allows you to fight. And you can imagine if you have access to Vivian and Voracious Hydra and all these ways to fight creatures, your average matchup against the creature decks is pretty good, right? Because you have a lot of ways to fight. But now that the devotion decks have moved away from those and more towards planeswalkers and things of that nature, they're really not as good at killing creatures. So that's where the deck like Spirits kind of gets its edge once the green decks start cutting cards like those. So yeah, Spirits a pretty good choice for this weekend, I think.
Yeah, served Carly pretty well. So. All right. Coming back to us here. So you get to see our pretty faces for a little bit longer here as the judge staff are we have an amazing judge staff. They get to sort this out way above my pay grade. So I'll let them do their thing, and then someone will tell me what happened, and I'll just spit it back out to y'all at home. At any rate, thanks for hitting that follow button. If you have it's your first time checking us out, thanks again for tuning in. We are in the quarterfinals here in Lansing, Michigan, and we are working towards crowning another champion. As soon as any of the other backup results come in too, I'll let you know as soon as we figure that out. The deck list should be available, I believe. Now they're all public now that all information is available to our top 8 players. So y'all can go home and you can find, you know what I'm going to do, Devin? I'm going to go look at the standings and I'm going to try and find a Lotus Field deck. And you're going to tell me what place the highest one was. Okay, we'll play a game.
I'm going to put the command in chat as well, because I believe there should be a Decklist command. Yeah, it looks like somebody did that for us. But yeah, if you want to take a look at the Decklist, type !Decklist in chat, and that should bring up the page. So if we could look at the standings.
This one says...
I'm scrolling down. I'm looking for Lotus Field. Oh. I can't seem to find it.
I saw that said Simic combo, and that is not the Lotus Field, by the way.
Oh, is that the Kinnan deck? I think it might have been the Kinnan deck. Yeah,
I see
that deck
Lotus
is sweet.
Breach. I see Lotus Breach, and I found my first one. Okay, I'm gonna scroll back
What's
up.
The number?
Sure. It was 65th.
Oh boy,
4 and 4.
Wow.
For Lotus Breach. Yeah, it's also shocking to me. I thought it was a pretty good deck, but yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one. I can't believe it was that low and a little underrepresented too. Sometimes these like combo centric decks, they feel kind of intimidating to play. I know back when Rally the Ancestors was like the best deck to be playing in Standard. I have played a ton of Magic. I play the Magic like 6 hours a day, and I still was like, I don't really know if I feel comfortable playing this deck, just because of like the elements that you need to be able to put together, and you kind of feel like an idiot if you mess something up. But yeah, it's definitely sometimes daunting, but the reward's pretty good when you play decks like that. And I always urge everyone to kind of step out of their comfort zone. Not only just if you think you don't know how to play deck and then you play it and you really like it, but also you get to learn from like your opponent's shoes, right? So if you're playing Rally the Ancestors and you don't really like it, but you get to learn things that your opponent is thinking, or you get to learn tendencies and turn setups and things like that. It's good to get all perspectives, so kind of branch out and figure out what your opponent's trying to do too.
Right, and going back to what we were talking about, Lotus Field having a bad weekend, I think part of the reason for that is because the devotion deck was so over highly represented, which we did expect.
Yeah.
But the devotion deck typically does have a favorable matchup against Lotus Field, and the reason for that is because of the card the Great Creators in the main deck, giving him access to Damping Sphere and things of that nature. So, looks like we are back here.
Okay, sounds like the fix is no fix. We've went past the point of fixing that land drop, so we're gonna move along just as is, and that's that just sometimes those things kind of happen.
Right. Yeah. It looks like after a couple. Sometimes it really depends on what changes, what with the board state. But yeah, a couple of turns had passed. One thing worth mentioning, we did talk about the hermits in the post board games for Raja. I'm pretty excited that he brought those in. I think they are very good. Mostly because you can. It's essentially a 2-for-1, right? You can get a counter spell on the front half, and then on the back half, cast it again, and then be able to trade with a creature from Carly.
Yeah. All right. Going to be a Fatal Push lineup. I think that's going at the Supreme Phantom. That's going to get Spell Pierced.
Yeah, so this is a decision for Raja. He can either let this go, or he can fire off that the Hermit. So that's I would assume a pretty good spot for the Hermit here. Trade the Hermit for the Spell Pierce. Next turn, especially if Raja has nothing else to do, he can just kind of get that back into play, make a 2/2 flyer. So yeah, we'll take a look.
All right. And that Mausoleum Wanderer, that's been a menace for Esper control decks for a long time.
Right, yeah, and it's basically we've I'm sure chat's all familiar with cards like Thalia of Great Guardian of Thraben. Mausoleum Wanderer kind of has that similar effect where you don't necessarily always want to play into it, and especially with Raja missing a couple of land drops here. I recall him missing a land drop on turn 3. Looks like maybe he found a couple after that, so maybe not as bad for Raja, but yeah, definitely kind of taxing Raja to in one way or another.
Yeah. All right. So. All right, looks like the Benevolent Geist comes in.
And okay, what did I miss there? Where'd the Hermit go? Okay, we
The Benevolent Geist.
Okay, Raja cast it. I got it. Raja cast it, and I think that met a counter spell from Carly. Okay.
Yep. There is that Kaya we spoke about earlier. Another Spell Pierce for Carly.
Yeah, I was gonna say Kaya really good for Raja here, able to answer that Wanderer, but yeah, another Spell Pierce from Carly, really, really good for her. I see Raja does have a copy of Supreme Verdict. Obviously, he's not really interested in firing that off for one creature. Wants to see if maybe Carly will commit more. So he's going to hold on to that for a while. And I believe Raja picked up Yorion. Oh no, Yorion's still over there. I saw something different. Okay.
Tons of counter spells here from Carly.
Yeah.
Trying to make some headway on Raja's life total, but Raja's only down to 13, and she's got 6 lands in play. Not exactly where you want to be.
Yeah, what Carly's really missing here is a second threat. A second early threat. There was a couple of turns early on where Raja missed a land drop, right? And if Carly had an additional threat on that turn where Raja missed a land drop, Raja was only able to resolve one removal spell. So imagine if all these turns are going by with Carly having 2 creatures. This game looks a lot different.
Yeah, oof. And we talked about Oath of Kaya, and Carly just shows land 7, land 8, and scoops them up, and gonna bring it to even here in this first quarterfinal match. So, just there was a lot of removal met with counterspells, removal, counterspell, removal, counterspell, and then the final removal spell stuck. So that's kind of how these games are gonna play out. Either the last removal spell sticks or the creature sticks, and that's kind of how I think this third and final game is gonna go. And like you mentioned, Devin Carly didn't have a second threat, so once the one gets taken off the board, you're just kind of stuck there with nothing, and at that point it was just all lands for Carly. It didn't really work out.
Right, yeah. It's she I think she went turn 1 Wanderer, turn 2 Supreme Phantom, but when the Supreme Phantom got answered, and then that's where she got sent tap with all of her mana. Wasn't it that was the turn where she really needed that second threat, something like a Rattle Chains or Brazen Bar or something like that. And had she had that second threat, that game probably looks a lot different, because now she's connecting with 2 creatures, which is while answering all of Raj's removal spells. But yeah, that 1/1 Wanderer not going to get the job done by itself.
Yeah, a little tough there. So I think Rattle Chains is probably the biggest card in this matchup for Carly. Just the biggest creature, I suppose. She has a bunch of counter spells and things like that. Like we saw the Spell Pierces hit. We saw that Lofty Denial. There's all these 4 mystical disputes. So yeah, I would say you're able to put down like Spectral Sailor or Ascendant Spirit plus a Rattle Chains is the best start you can possibly have. And again, she's gonna be on the play for game number 3.
Yeah, Rattle Chains, as we've talked about a couple of times here, definitely the card that the Carly's best card in the matchup. It allows her now, obviously, things like Spectral Sailor and Brazen Bar already have flash, but giving every single creature in your deck flash allows you to play just dictate the pace of the game. You get to hold up all of your mana while you're continuing to deal with Raja's removal spells up the curve. And then on turns where Raja doesn't decide to deploy a removal spell, then you can not burn your mana essentially, and you still get to deploy creatures. So really, really important card for Carly. That's the card that she's going to be looking for the most.
Yeah, blanking, one of Raja's removal spells. Like you're putting the onus on Raja to time his removal spells at the best possible time, and it's really difficult push and play. I've been on the side where the control deck side before playing against the Spirits deck, and you're like, well, should I just jam this now? There's no way they have Rattle Chains, right? And then they have Rattle Chains, and you're like, okay, well, here I'll kill this Rattle Chains. There's no way they have another one, right? And then they have another one, and you just feel like so far behind. So it's definitely a difficult matchup to push and play from each side. But I'd be interested to see again if Carly has a 1-drop on their first turn. It's going to be tough for Raja to be able to come back from without like some sort of sweeper or a bunch of targeted removal spells.
Yeah, and then a card that we saw a couple of times from Carly in that match was Spell Pierce. That card is an absolute beating because most of Raja's cards outside of Fatal Push cost 2, 3, 4 mana. So that's really a way to get this massive, massive tempo advantage from Carly's side. And then on Raja's side, Supreme Verdict, that one you can't counter. So definitely looking to see, like you mentioned, if Carly, now obviously Carly knows about the Supreme Verdict, so it's one of those things. It's a balance, right, where you have to figure out how much pressure do I want to put into play, how much do I want to commit to a Supreme Verdict versus how much do I need to have left over if Raja does have a Supreme Verdict. So it's really all about a delicate balance and figuring out, when do I kind of push my advantage a little bit, when do I hold back, and it's really going to depend on, I think, those cheap counter spells.
Yeah, the other thing I saw in Carly's matchup, I want to say it was round 1. It was one of those early rounds. She has 3 faceless havens in her deck also. So once one of the Supreme Verdicts happens, you're still able to build with this creature land, and that's super important. Able to squeeze, I believe, 3 of them into a mono blue deck is a big deal. Again, it's kind of insulation against those Wrath style decks. So you're able to put a few things down. If they're to sweep you some way, you still have this to clean up, and that's a pretty big one for their deck.
Yeah, and now you mentioned creature lands. That is something we've seen a lot over the course of basically every single round. You look at the Rakdos decks, they have Den of the Bugbear and Hive of the Eye Tyrant. You see the green decks have access to, what's the green? Lair of the Hydra.
Yeah.
We have, Raja's deck has Shambling Vent. There's what's the blue one is Hall of Storm Giants. So just the creature lands in Pioneer are so important, especially with these control decks having sweepers, and you have the Niv deck that has a lot of sweepers. Really, really important to have access to these creature lands when your primary game plan is being dealt with.
Yeah, definitely with you. Very important, and I think I mentioned it earlier when you and I are doing this. Like they don't make lands. Like the old lands have
Yeah.
nothing on the new lands. Like the a 4/3 attacking land is crazy. Like and it's colorless. Anybody can use it. So it's pretty crazy to see how we've adapted here. So sounds like we're
Yeah,
almost ready.
compare those to things like Raging Ravine and
Yeah,
what was the
Lava Claw
blue red
Reaches.
one? What was
That's a terrible
the
card.
Wandering Fumarole and
Oh,
things of that
terrible.
nature? We've come a long way for creature lands.
Yeah, Wandering from. I remember playing that, and switching it from 4-1 to 1-4 and felt like I was the smartest person on planet Earth. It's like, yeah, it's not even good. So yeah, we've come a long way. So it sounds like we might have game 3 underway. Yeah, we're almost ready to roll here. Third and final game of our first quarterfinal here. We do have a backup going at the same time, so we'll get your results on our other backup matches too that were off camera when we can, and we'll kind of see where we're at for the day.
Yeah, I think the backup match was actually Raja's, I believe Raja's teammate Zach, who we mentioned earlier. I think they played the exact same 95. I saw a post on Twitter. They were kind of talking about it. So yeah, definitely worked in the deck together, and results are definitely proving it.
Okay, all right. Sounds like we're ready, and Carly deploys an island. No one drop yet.
Yeah, that's very, very important here. No one drop, but we do have a 2-drop.
Yeah. And now that is a Shacklegeist, I believe, which is, we mentioned it was maybe their worst creature in this matchup, but again, still a 2/2 in the air, so not the worst. At least you have a 2-drop, you know?
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's better to have something than nothing. You know, it is probably the weakest creature in Carly's deck, but given the fact that they didn't have a 1-drop, it makes a lot of sense here. You know, you kind of need something to just, you can't just sit here and play Draco with the Esper control deck.
Yeah, I think it's great too because it's a card that you'd rather have die first, right? So if you're going to present a threat, I think it's the one you want to present first. That way, Raja again has to deal with it at some point, and if it's going to be a fatal push or a Bloodchief's Thirst, whatever it is, you'd rather have that one go down than any of your other cards.
All right, so we have land number 3 for Raja, and I believe I see 2 copies of Hermit, a Mystical Dispute, may or may not be a Fatal Push. Well, hard to tell. We'll see. Okay, very very crucial turn here. Just passing with not main phasing any removal spell, and that has to be a really good sign for Carly. She gets to untap with both of her threats, and if she has any type of counter spell, we can maybe go after Raja's removal spells here.
I love this, by the way. Just attack for 3, and Raja says okay, and Carly says okay, and now Raja has to act. So that's definitely the onus is on Raja to act in this. And there's that rattle chains we talked about. Going to give hexproof. Going to get countered actually. So big
Yeah,
time
there's
play.
the Mystical Dispute.
Yeah, big tempo swings there.
And that's a pretty big tell for Carly. If Raja had something like a Supreme Verdict in hand, there's no way he would have fought over that Rattle Chains. He would just untap and slam Verdict. So at least from Carly's perspective, if I'm Carly, I'm thinking, okay, Raja probably doesn't have Supreme Verdict.
Yeah, almost certainly no Supreme Verdict here. And there's double Hermit. That's a choice, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing you got to think about is, what if we just started to?
Wow.
Oh, okay.
Well, now
That's
again,
a really good turn for Carly.
Like you said though, that's the tell, right? It's you have to be able to read things like this. And Carly says, you know what? You don't have Supreme Verdict. I'm going to put 2 Supreme Phantoms down. And I'm going to crack you for 4. And now you have to deal with it.
Yeah, and I think that like exactly what you said. Carly kind of got the read that Raja didn't have the Supreme Verdict. Felt like the coast was clear and definitely going to get rewarded. Now we'll see if Raja has an answer to one of these phantoms, which will significantly decrease Carly's clock. And it looks like he does have a Void Rend, so that'll clean up one of the. All right, I like it. Oh, isn't it? What is it? Tap? Is it tap a non-flyer? No, just tap any creature. Oh yeah, but we'd rather leave up the 1/3 because the 1/3 blocks both of. Yeah, okay, that makes more
Another
sense.
Supreme Phantom. Wow.
All right, another Phantom just getting into the red zone.
That's
This
6,
is going
right?
to be 6. Yeah, this is a 2-turn clock. Raja's in
All right.
trouble.
There's a Vanishing Verse. That's
See,
gonna keep you alive for 1 more turn at least.
yeah, a Verse, a Teferi, and I think a Veto.
Oh, there's a Rattle Chains though.
That's it. Rattle Chains is going to protect it, and that is going to do it.
Oh wow, what a rip for Carly.
Crazy game here.
All right.
Yeah, I think Carly played that incredibly well.
Oh yeah, yeah, that was amazing. I mean, you said it, Devin. You know, if Raja, so man, that's a great one to rewind back. So, like you said though, so if when Carly goes to give hexproof to her creature, Raja fights over it. And like you said, the read is Raja would not have fought over it if he had a sweeper effect of some sort, right? And you have to be able to make those small choices in your head. Those things have to register and click in your brain if you're going to play a deck like this mono blue deck, to know when to put your foot on the gas and push to the floorboard. And Carly said, "Fine, you might have it. You might have baited me. Here's 2 Supreme Phantoms. Let's go to work." And she got there in the end, and a really incredible read. That's just a really heads up play, and great play by Carly.
Right, yeah, very, very well sequenced. As you mentioned, the early Shackle Geist were nice bait cards that she really didn't care too much about, just stuff on the board that allows the start attacking and blocking. But cards that she didn't really care that much about, trade those for removal spells, and then follow up with the haymakers like the Supreme Phantoms to get the clock going. And yeah, she was able to close it out. Very, very impressive stuff from Carly.
Yeah, unbelievable, great read. That's going to be a good one. Sounds like all of our top 8 matches are done, and I'll tell you what. So let's do this. Let's take a brief break here. We're going to get our semifinals ready to roll, and Devin and I will come back. We'll talk about the results from the other 3 matches, and we'll get you a semifinals bracket. Again, the deck lists are all available. You hit !deck lists in our chat. You can check them out on MTG Melee. We're going to take a brief break, and we'll be back with the semifinals in just a few.